They mistook my sacrifice for weakness, demanding my life savings while I clung to life.
So selfish.
The moment they wished me gone, I began my opulent revenge. The sterile scent of the hospital room, a harsh blend of sanitizer and fear, was the backdrop for my final agonizing realization. I was not just Evelyn, the 72-year-old retired architect recovering from an emergency angioplasty. I was Evelyn, the ATM with a heartbeat. I lay tethered to a dozen machines, the insistent beep of the ECG monitoring a rhythm that felt increasingly detached from my spirit. It was the third day, and no flower had arrived, no call had been returned. Then, the door swung open, and the silence was instantly poisoned by the presence of my daughter, Cassandra, and her perpetually anxious husband, Derek. They didn't rush to my side. Cassandra stood near the foot of the bed, her face an impeccable mask of designer concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her immediate focus wasn't my pallor or the raw incision on my wrist, but the small, leather-bound financial planner resting on the bedside table. "Mom, we have to talk about the trust," Cassandra began, skipping the formalities of asking after my health entirely. Her voice, usually a velvety purr for her social media following, was now strained with a brittle, undisguised panic. My blood pressure monitor registered a spike. Talk about the trust? I had just survived a near-fatal coronary event, and the most pressing issue for my only child was the allocation of funds I had meticulously built over 5 decades. "Cassandra, I just had 3 stents placed," I murmured, my voice rasping from the intubation. "Can this wait until I'm home?" "No, it absolutely cannot wait," she insisted, stepping closer, her expensive leather tote bumping the drip stand. Derek shifted uncomfortably behind her, a ghost of a man swallowed by his wife's entitlement. "The new lifestyle column is launching, and we need the immediate quarterly draw to cover the initial marketing spend. We can't afford any delays, especially not now. Not now." The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Not now, when you've inconvenienced us by almost dying. I felt a coldness creeping through me, far deeper than the air conditioning. It was the chilling certainty that the narrative of my life had been fundamentally flawed. I had believed I was building a legacy of love. I had only succeeded in creating a monument to exploitation. And what if I hadn't made it, Cassandra? I asked, testing the waters. The question was brutal, but I needed to hear the answer articulated. If that heart attack had taken me, what would have been your first thought? Cassandra didn't miss a beat. She stared at the ceiling, then back at me, her expression settling into a weary resignation. The look of a beautiful woman forced to deal with an inconvenient truth. "Honestly, Mom, it would have been a relief," she confessed, the words slicing through the air like shards of glass. "I mean, yes, it would be awful, but then the full inheritance would transfer immediately. We wouldn't have to deal with the constant meddling, the judgments, or the financial bureaucracy of asking you for our own money. You've become a burden, Mom, a beautiful, expensive burden." The ECG machine, an unforgiving witness, picked up the jagged, sudden spike in my heart rate. The nurse rushed in, alarmed by the blaring warning signal. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional hemorrhage her words had caused. A beautiful, expensive burden. That was my eulogy. That was the summation of my entire existence in their world. The nurse stabilized me and gave them a sharp warning to leave. As Cassandra gathered her things, her gaze fell once more on the financial planner. She didn't look at me again. Her focus was purely on the tangible assets I represented. In the ensuing silence, after the door closed, I didn't cry. Tears, I realized, were a currency I had spent too freely on undeserving recipients. Instead, a serene, icy clarity descended upon me. The anguish transformed into a powerful, surgical resolve. For 72 years, I had followed the script of the devoted mother. I bankrolled her lavish Upper East Side condominium, subsidized Derek's failed startups, and became the silent safety net for my 2 grandchildren. My entire identity was wrapped up in being their provider and problem solver. But now that they had openly declared my physical death preferable to my continuous, albeit burdensome, life, the contract was null and void. They wanted me gone? They would have it. but they would not get the predictable, easy transfer of assets they so craved. The real estate market had been climbing. My pre-war penthouse in Greenwich Village, my last truly independent asset, was now worth nearly $3 million. Cassandra had always assumed it would be hers instantly. She had calculated her future on my demise, not my disappearance. I reached for the phone. I bypassed the call button for the nurse and instead dialed the number for Sterling and Associates, the firm that handled all my complex investments and real estate trusts. "Mr. Sterling," I whispered, my voice regaining its strength, fueled by a terrifying new resolve. "I need you to initiate the process immediately, all of it. The sale of the Greenwich property, the complete restructuring of the trust fund's distribution schedule, and the activation of the foreclosure clause on the 48th Street condo." Yes, the condo I co-signed for Cassandra. Mr. Sterling, a seasoned professional known for his unflappable demeanor, paused on the other end. "Evelyn, this is highly unusual. Are you certain? That condo is nearly $1 million. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life, Harrison," I replied, a chilling smile touching my lips. They wanted me to be dead. And when I die, the wealth should follow the corpse, shouldn't it? Well, I'm choosing a different kind of death, a financial demise from their lives. I dictated the initial steps, my memory for contractual details startlingly sharp despite the medication. I instructed him to prepare a complex, ironclad legal firewall. My destination, my literal rebirth, needed to be established instantly. I had been secretly researching investment properties abroad for months, a hidden fantasy I never dared indulge. I had focused on places where my financial independence would grant me immediate, seamless residency and elite healthcare, the high, pristine isolation of the Andes Mountains. Specifically, a luxury eco-retreat in Patagonia, Argentina. "Mr. Sterling, I need you to charter a medical jet, discreetly. I want to be discharged directly from this hospital and on a plane to Buenos Aires within 72 hours. And I need a single, detailed letter delivered to Cassandra on the day of my arrival. A letter detailing all the immediate financial consequences of my burdensome existence coming to an end." The ECG machine beside me, having briefly registered the terrifying beat of a betrayed heart, was now monitoring a new, steady rhythm, the cadence of retribution. The next 2 days were a blur of hushed phone calls and signing documents under the careful eye of Mr. Sterling, who had moved his office temporarily to my private hospital room. He was a professional, but I saw the mixture of admiration and pity in his eyes. He knew I wasn't just abandoning my daughter. I was executing a surgical strike on the golden cage she had built around me. "Evelyn, are you absolutely sure you want to proceed with the entire restructuring?" Mr. Sterling asked, tapping a pen against the stack of legal binders. "Removing Cassandra entirely from the principal trust, changing your life insurance beneficiary to the Thorn Foundation for Independent Women. This is irrevocable." I looked out the window at the familiar, concrete cityscape of New York, a city I had helped design and build, a city that now felt like a suffocating crypt. "Irrevocable is precisely what I require, Harrison." Her words were irrevocable. My response must be equally decisive. We worked through the night. The trust's principal, nearly $8 million, was rerouted. The deed to the Greenwich Village penthouse was already on its way to closing, the buyers having signed a non-disclosure agreement and a rapid transfer clause. The money from that sale, $2.9 million net, was earmarked for immediate long-term investments in Argentine real estate and high-yield, low-risk international bonds. The final piece of paperwork was the most satisfying, the official notification of intent to exercise my rights as the co-signer on Cassandra's luxury condo mortgage. Since Derek, her husband, had just quietly lost his job at the tech firm, a fact I gleaned from a quick, cold search online, not from my daughter, and their joint accounts were habitually low, the timing was perfect. The bank would be legally obligated to initiate foreclosure proceedings if I, the co-signer, cited concerns over the borrower's ability to pay, effectively forcing Cassandra's hand. "The letter of notification for the condo will be delivered Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time," Mr. Sterling confirmed, stacking the documents. The jet is cleared for a 4 a.m. departure on Tuesday from Teterboro. Everything is ready. I nodded, the metallic taste of the hospital water failing to quench the thirst for liberty that had consumed me. Before leaving the hospital, I had one final crucial meeting. It was with Marilyn, the unflappable 60-year-old concierge of my soon-to-be-sold Manhattan building. Marilyn had been my confidant, a quiet observer of Cassandra's avarice for over a decade. "Marilyn," I said, handing her a substantial check, more than her annual salary, and a thick, sealed manila envelope. "You are my accomplice. This is a letter for Cassandra. It is to be delivered only after she calls you in a panic, asking where I am." Marilyn's deep brown eyes, which had seen everything from Wall Street meltdowns to marital implosions, were bright with understanding. "She hasn't called you since, has she?" "No," I replied dryly. "She assumes I'm either recovering quietly or preferably too weak to interfere with her marketing launch. She will only call when she realizes her source code has failed." "And what should I tell her, Evelyn?" "Tell her I left a note," I instructed, my voice unwavering. "Tell her I wanted a fresh start. And when she demands the note, hand her this envelope and tell her, this is everything she left. Read it carefully. Actions have consequences." Marilyn took the envelope, her face set in a look of grim satisfaction. "Consider it done, Evelyn. I always knew you had a spine of steel, not a wallet for a heart. The private jet, a sleek white bird, felt like a chariot of emancipation. I was discharged at 4 a.m., bypassing the main entrance, and whisked directly to Teterboro. As the jet lifted off, I looked down at the retreating lights of the city. I was leaving behind the ruins of a life I had mistakenly thought was built on love, but which was, in fact, built on conditional currency. The flight to Buenos Aires was long but strangely rejuvenating. I used the time to study the details of my new life, Patagonia, El Calafate. My new refuge was a custom-designed modernist retreat built into the hillside overlooking the massive Perito Moreno Glacier. The air was clean, the silence profound, the landscape overwhelmingly majestic, a perfect antidote to the manufactured clamor of Cassandra's world. I had purchased it anonymously through a trust, paying cash. It offered the ultimate, untraceable sanctuary. Upon arrival in Buenos Aires, a local financial advisor, a quiet, brilliant woman named Dr. Sofia Reyes, met me. She specialized in managing wealth for international retirees seeking maximum discretion. "Welcome to Argentina, Mrs. Thorne," Sofia greeted me warmly. "Your investments are already structured and your residency papers are pending. You have chosen wisely. Here you are not defined by who you were, but by who you intend to be." As the internal flight carried me south, towards the jagged peaks of the Andes, I felt the first genuine stirrings of self-interest I had allowed myself in decades. The money, the time, the emotional bandwidth, it was all mine. I landed in El Calafate. Sophia drove me through the vast, windswept plains, eventually stopping before a structure of glass and natural wood. My new home. The view of the ice field was breathtaking. A landscape of profound, ancient indifference, exactly what I needed to absorb. Inside, everything was prepared. The silence was palpable. I sat on the Italian leather sofa, pulling out the one item I had carried with me, the item I had refused to dispose of, the little, scuffed, leather-bound financial planner that had rested on my hospital nightstand. I opened it, not to calculate, but to reflect. On the second page, I had written a single, defining sentence when I first started working as a young woman. "My wealth is for my freedom." How painfully ironic that it had become the key to my imprisonment. I reached for my satellite phone, the only line I would use to communicate with Mr. Sterling. It was time to confirm that the letter had been delivered. I imagined Cassandra, standing in her immaculate subsidized condo, reading the document that detailed the collapse of her golden parachute. It was Tuesday, 10:05 a.m. in New York. The storm had just begun. I spent the first day in Patagonia entirely disconnected, savoring the profound stillness. The silence was so thick it felt like a physical presence, a protective blanket woven from ice and wind. It was the first time in 40 years I had experienced a total lack of demand. No phone calls, no urgent texts, no veiled requests for funds, only the slow, grinding groan of the ancient glacier outside my window. By Wednesday morning, New York time, the storm I had unleashed was in full, terrifying swing. I powered on the satellite phone. The flood of notifications was immediate and overwhelming. 53 missed calls, 38 frantic texts, and a barrage of voicemails. They were all from Cassandra and Derek. The first texts, sent Tuesday morning shortly after Marilyn delivered the letter, were surprisingly mild, almost patronizing. Cassandra, 10:15 a.m. Mom, what is this nonsense from Marilyn? It's not funny. Call me back. We have appointments. Derek, 10:45 a.m. Evelyn, this letter is extremely aggressive. You can't just change the trust. We need to schedule a meeting with Sterling immediately to sort out this misunderstanding. But the tone quickly spiraled downward as they absorbed the legal gravity of the documents. The letter I had meticulously crafted was not a personal note. It was a legal declaration of non-support, detailing every change, the closure of the emergency account, the full rerouting of the inheritance, and most critically, the formal notification to the mortgage holder regarding my concerns over their solvency. Cassandra, 3:00 p.m. The bank just called us for a meeting. What have you done, Mom? You can't do this. This is completely unhinged behavior after your hospital scare. We're going to lose the condo. Derek, 7:00 p.m. We called Sterling. He said he has no legal obligation to speak to us and confirmed the trust changes. He said you were perfectly lucid. Evelyn, are you trying to ruin us? The last message struck me with a cold jolt of satisfaction. Are you trying to ruin us? For years, Cassandra had been systematically eroding my financial safety, ruining my retirement, and draining my emotional reserves, all under the guise of familial love. I was merely returning the favor with compound interest. I walked out onto my private deck, the air biting but exhilarating. I finally called Mr. Sterling. Harrison, what is the current status of the 48th Street condo? Evelyn, his voice sounded weary but respectful. Cassandra and Derek are in full panic mode. They have contacted 3 different lawyers, all of whom have confirmed the legality of your actions. Since you cited their recent financial instability and Derek's job loss, the bank is moving quickly. They have until the end of the month to find a massive sum to buy out your cosigner share, or foreclosure proceedings will begin. And the trust funds? Sealed! Irrevocable! They have nothing! Mr. Sterling paused. She keeps trying to contact me, insisting that you must be suffering from some form of dementia due to the heart attack. She's alleging you were coerced or incapable of understanding the complexity of the documents. I smiled, a genuine, crystalline smile that felt alien on my face. Tell her I'm enjoying the best mental health I have had in decades, Harrison. And remind her that I am the retired architect who designed half of the Midtown skyline. I understand contracts better than she understands a social media algorithm. I hung up and decided to reply to just one message from Cassandra. The most recent one, which was a hysterical, tear-filled voice message that had broken into my serenity. I typed slowly, deliberately, I am exactly where I need to be. And yes, I am quite well. Now you understand the true tangible cost of losing your burden. The response was instantaneous. You don't understand what you're doing. You're destroying your grandchildren's future over a tantrum. Come home, Mom, and we can fix this. A tantrum. She reduced my 4 decades of sacrificial motherhood and my agonizing rebirth into a childish fit. I typed my final, brutal reply. The future of my grandchildren is now dependent on the decisions of their parents. That is called adulthood, Cassandra. I hope this experience helps you understand the value of a mother before you treat others in your life with the same disposable cruelty. Then, with a decisive movement, I blocked her number, Derek's number, and all associated known contacts. The phone, once my leash, became a beautiful, silent object. The rest of the day was devoted to absorbing my new reality. I met with Sophia, my advisor. We walked through the intricacies of Patagonian life, residency requirements, local banking, and the vibrant expat community. I discovered a world of independent, strong-willed women who had chosen to write their final chapters in stunning isolation, escaping various forms of emotional and financial bondage. "It is fascinating," Sophia observed as we reviewed my investment portfolio, now healthy and growing rapidly without the constant hemorrhage of Cassandra's demands. "The money that was stagnant, waiting to be spent on others, is now working exponentially for you. Your retirement fund has almost doubled its projected growth in 3 weeks, simply by eliminating the leak." That night, I celebrated. I ordered a fine Argentine Malbec, a complex dark red that mirrored the depth of my resolve. I raised the glass not to the future, but to the memory of the broken woman I had left behind in that sterile New York hospital room. The old Evelyn was dead. Long live the new one, and her legacy would be one of unconditional self-preservation. The digital onslaught intensified. Cassandra, unable to attack me legally or physically, turned to the medium she controlled: social media. Her betrayal video went viral within her niche, generating a split reaction: intense sympathy from those who saw only the tearful daughter, and intense suspicion from those who knew the signs of performative victimhood. I watched a few clips in my Patagonian sanctuary, not directly, but through an anonymous proxy link provided by Sophia. Cassandra's narrative was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. She sat backlit, her voice trembling as she described her frail, confused mother being kidnapped by her lawyer into an irrational overseas exile. "She thinks I'm sick," I told Sophia, gesturing at the snow-capped mountains of the Andes visible through the glass wall. "She thinks that only insanity could explain my decision to stop funding her life." "It's a classic power play, Evelyn," Sophia observed, calmly reviewing a bond prospectus. "If she can prove you lacked capacity, she can reverse all the legal documents, reinstate the trust, and seize control. It's not about love. It's about fiduciary control." I had anticipated this move. It was the only logical next step when all other legal avenues were blocked. Cassandra was deploying the most vicious weapon available, attacking my sanity to preserve her solvency. Mr. Sterling confirmed the next wave of legal maneuvers. "They have officially filed a petition alleging your mental incapacity. They are demanding a full psychological and neurological evaluation by a court-appointed physician." "I accept," I stated without hesitation. "But not in New York. I will coordinate the evaluation through the U.S. consulate in Buenos Aires. The doctors must be internationally accredited and completely independent. The challenge was in the coordination. I spent 2 days in intense video conferences with U.S. Embassy staff and highly regarded specialists in Buenos Aires. The process was humiliating, forcing me to recount the agonizing details of my life, the sacrifices, the payments, the $150,000 condo investment, and finally, the words uttered in the hospital room. The most difficult session was with the forensic psychologist, Dr. Elena Vargas. She asked probing, intimate questions about my childhood, my marriage, and my relationship with my daughter. "Mrs. Thorne," Dr. Vargas asked softly, leaning forward, "why did you wait until a near-fatal health crisis to finally make these changes? Why not years ago?" I paused, staring at the Patagonian sun glinting off the glacier. "Because, doctor, for 40 years, I confused emotional manipulation with filial devotion. I believed a good mother must sacrifice her very self for her child's perceived happiness. It took the absolute brutality of her wishing me dead to finally break the psychological chains I had forged for myself. It was the cruelest gift I ever received. The moment she confirmed I was merely a financial burden, I was instantly freed from the burden of loving her unconditionally." Dr. Vargas wrote something down, her expression unreadable. "And your decision to move to Patagonia, sell your assets, and cut off all contact. Do you see that as rational?" "It is the most rational decision I have ever made," I affirmed, my voice ringing with conviction. "It is the act of a woman seeking to preserve her dignity, her financial security, and her remaining lifespan. Had I stayed, I would have died sooner, financially drained and emotionally crushed. This is not a flight from reality. It is a flight to reality. The session concluded. I felt exposed but clean. I had laid bare the truth of my life, not for their judgment, but for my own validation. While I awaited the official medical findings, Cassandra's public attacks continued. She began posting nostalgic, tear-jerking photos of the children, captioning them with cryptic appeals. "We miss you, Grandma. Come home." The sight of Leo and Maya, their faces distorted by her calculated emotional framing, was a sharp, fresh pain. They were the truly innocent ones. But then, an unexpected crack appeared in Cassandra's facade. A comment was posted beneath one of her tearful videos, a comment from a woman named Alara, a fellow blogger who had once collaborated with Cassandra Alara. "I follow you, Cassandra, but I also know your mother, Evelyn, privately. This narrative doesn't sit right. Evelyn subsidized your condo, paid for your first 2 business attempts, and watched your children every single time you needed a weekend away. Some of us remember the financial reality. Perhaps the frail mother simply decided to stop paying." The comment was deleted instantly, but not before a dozen followers had screenshotted it. The digital narrative was no longer solely Cassandra's. The suspicion had been sown. Later that evening, Mr. Sterling called with the official news. "Evelyn, the report is complete. The court received the official document from the U.S. consulate today. It states unequivocally that you are of sound and exceptional mental health, and that your complex financial planning demonstrates admirable lucidity and foresight. Her case for diminished capacity is officially dead." The victory was profound. Cassandra had used her last, most poisonous arrow, and it had failed, ricocheting back to stain her own reputation. "Now, Harrison," I said, looking out at the vast, silent expanse of the Patagonian night, "it is time for the next step. I want you to prepare a defamation lawsuit against Cassandra Thorne, citing her malicious and public accusations of cognitive decline, which directly impacted my personal and business reputation. Let her taste the true cost of libel." The filing of the defamation lawsuit in New York was not about the money, which would be negligible compared to my assets. It was about restoring the narrative. Cassandra had spent weeks painting me as a senile, vengeful villain. Now, the court system itself would provide the platform for the truth. "The suit is filed, Evelyn," Mr. Sterling confirmed. "The news has already leaked to a few financial blogs. The general consensus is shifting. They're asking, why would a cognitively impaired woman flawlessly execute a multi-million-dollar international relocation and a complex financial maneuver? The best revenge is a life well lived, Harrison, but a well-timed lawsuit helps too," I quipped. The psychological relief that followed the legal victory was immense. I was officially sane in the eyes of the law, and Cassandra was now documented as a litigant who had filed a false and malicious complaint against a family member. I decided to fully immerse myself in the Patagonian lifestyle. I met Sophia at a local artisanal market in El Califate. She introduced me to a tight-knit community of expats, all women in their 60s and 70s who had relocated from Europe and North America. They were professors, artists, diplomats, and business owners, all seeking the same thing, a final chapter of self-governance. One woman, Astrid, a retired Swiss banker, shared her story over strong Argentine coffee. "My son," Astrid said, stirring her cup, "he saw me as a guaranteed pension plan. Every Christmas it was a new car. Every summer a down payment on a boat. When I finally sold my assets and moved here, he accused me of betraying my heritage. Mine accused me of having a tantrum," I smiled wryly. "Oh, it's always the same language, isn't it?" Astrid laughed, a deep, knowing sound. "They can't fathom that our money is ours. They confuse our generosity with dependency." It was a profound comfort to be surrounded by women who understood the specific, soul-crushing abuse of the entitled adult child. I was not a solitary case of bad luck. I was a veteran of a silent war waged by a narcissistic generation. I started a photography course with Ricardo, spending hours trekking through the wilderness, capturing the stark beauty of the estancias and the fleeting, intense Patagonian light. The focus and precision required by the large format camera was a soothing counterpoint to the chaos I had escaped. Meanwhile, The true climax of my plan was approaching. The foreclosure. Mr. Sterling called a few weeks later, his voice heavy with finality. Evelyn, the bank's auction date for the 48th Street condo is set. Cassandra and Derek missed the final payment deadline to buy out your co-signer share. They simply don't have the cash. I felt a surge of cold triumph, but it was immediately tempered by a familiar ache of guilt. And the children, Harrison. They have moved into a small rental on the edge of Queens, he informed me, having clearly investigated. Derek is working as a temp. Cassandra is still attempting to maintain her lifestyle blog facade, but the content is becoming erratic. They are essentially experiencing the consequences of financial adulthood for the first time. It is a harsh education, I admitted, my eyes fixed on the distant, glittering blue of the glacier lake. But it is an education they desperately need. The ultimate financial retribution was about to be realized. The condo, purchased at $950,000, was now valued at $1.3 million. My initial co-signed investment of $150,000 was fully protected. Once the sale was finalized, I would not only recoup my capital, but also be entitled to the accrued interest on my share. I spent the day of the auction on a solitary hike. I needed to honor the emotional complexity of the moment. I did not wish them ruin, but I desperately needed them to experience consequence. I needed them to understand the vast gaping void created by the loss of their financial security blanket. That evening, Mr. Sterling's email arrived. Subject: Closure. Evelyn, the condo was sold at auction today. The bank has approved the transfer of your principal investment and accumulated interest. You will be receiving a wire transfer of $195,000 next week. I stared at the number on my screen. $95,000? Not only had I rescued my original investment, but the forced sale had netted me an additional $45,000 in interest and capital appreciation, the money that Cassandra had wished me dead for. The money she assumed would inevitably be hers was now pouring back into my account, funding the life she considered a tropical tantrum. It was a perfect, poetic inversion of fortune. I stood up, walked to my deck, and watched the Patagonian stars blaze in the unpolluted night sky. I was no longer a victim. I was an independent woman of means, a survivor who had turned the greatest betrayal into the greatest investment of her life. The arrival of the $195,000 wire transfer in my Argentine account felt like the final, physical severing of the umbilical cord. The bank confirmation email was cold, impersonal, and undeniably satisfying. It represented not just money, but a vindication of my sanity and a testament to my financial acumen. I immediately called Sophia to discuss the reallocation of the new capital. This is the money she thought was hers. Sophia, I explained, I want it invested aggressively but securely. I want it to compound, to represent the growth I stunted for decades by continuously underwriting Cassandra's irresponsibility. Sophia proposed a diversified portfolio heavy on emerging market bonds and sustainable energy, investments, a stark departure from the conservative, liquid holdings I maintained solely for Cassandra's emergency withdrawals. My wealth, previously designed to be instantly accessible to others, was now being optimized for exponential self-growth. In 5 years, Evelyn, Sophia projected, her finger tracing a complex graph on her tablet. This $195,000 alone could double, perhaps triple, based on current market trends. Double my assets. The phrase echoed the original narrative, but this time, the growth was mine. The beneficiary was me. I realized the true genius of my escape. By eliminating the drain, Cassandra, I hadn't just saved money. I had released the latent potential of my entire portfolio. I celebrated that evening at a local Parrilla, ordering the finest cut of Argentine beef and a vintage Malbec, pairing it with the company of Astrid and Dr. Ricardo Vega. I toasted them both, Astrid for her shared wisdom, and Ricardo for teaching me the indifference of the glacier. I am officially debt-free and financially whole, I announced to them. My daughter lost the condo. The collateral damage is regrettable, but the lesson, I hope, will be priceless. Astrid nodded, her expression complex. The hardest thing is letting go of the guilt, Evelyn. We are programmed to feel responsible for their failures. But you must remember, they failed because they never had to learn to succeed. The next morning, I received a carefully worded emotional email from Marilyn. Evelyn, it's not good here. Cassandra is working 2 part-time jobs, one waiting tables, one attempting to revive her blog, and Derek is driving for a rideshare service. The children are clearly struggling with the change in schools and the cramped living conditions in Queens. They are experiencing genuine hardship. Marilyn's account was meant to evoke pity, but it instead solidified my resolve. This wasn't hardship. This was normalcy. This was the reality of living within one's means, a reality they had avoided for decades on my dime. I replied to Marilyn, I appreciate the update, but I need you to maintain distance. Tell Cassandra, if she contacts you, that I am perfectly well and have secured my permanent residency here. Tell her that the woman who sacrificed herself died on the day she wished it, and the woman who took her place has no intention of returning. My focus shifted from the external drama to the internal reconstruction. I doubled down on my Spanish lessons and dedicated 3 afternoons a week to abstract watercolor painting, an art form I had neglected during my high-stress architectural career. The Patagonian light, vast and unforgiving, was perfect for the sweeping emotional strokes I now felt compelled to execute. One afternoon, a small local newspaper ran a short article picked up by a small, independent online media outlet focused on expat life. The headline was intriguing. Millionaire matriarch finds peace in Patagonia after family estrangement. The article, clearly sourced from a local gossip trail and perhaps a discreet nod from Sophia, was respectful but detailed the immense wealth of the retired architect from New York, who had chosen the solitude of the Andes. I knew Cassandra would find it. The internet was her primary domain, sure enough. A day later, I received a burner email, routed through a complex VPN, from an address I instinctively knew belonged to her. Subject, the article. Mom, I saw the article. You're worth over $1 million and you let us lose the condo? You let the children live in a 2-bedroom apartment over a misunderstanding? You are truly cruel. I will never forgive you for this. You used your money as a weapon. The rage was palpable, but the tone was revealing. She still saw my money as hers. She didn't mourn the loss of our relationship. She mourned the loss of the revenue stream. I deleted the email instantly. No reply. The only way to win this war was to enforce total emotional silence. However, the article served a powerful secondary purpose. It officially validated my new identity. I was no longer defined by Cassandra's need, but by my own sovereignty. I was Evelyn Thorne, the woman who had the courage to choose the glacier over the gilded cage. That night, watching a massive condor circle over the valley, I made a new entry in my recovered financial planner. My wealth is for my freedom, and my freedom is my greatest creation. With the financial settlements finalized and the defamation suits silently grinding through the courts, a constant, expensive nuisance for Cassandra, my life in Patagonia moved into a phase of opulent stability. My total net worth, including the sale of the Greenwich penthouse and my restructured investments, now stood just shy of $3.5 million at 75. I was richer, healthier, and demonstrably saner than I had been at 60. The elimination of stress, the constant worry of what Cassandra would need next, had lowered my blood pressure dramatically, forcing my doctor to reduce my medication. Freedom, I discovered, was the most potent antidote to chronic stress. I dedicated myself to establishing a new curriculum for my final years. This wasn't retirement. It was reconstruction. The intellectual pursuit, Spanish and history. I traveled extensively throughout Argentina, immersing myself in the country's rich, tragic history. I started writing, not a memoir yet, but detailed historical essays on the architecture and politics of Buenos Aires. My mind, long dulled by domestic distraction, felt sharp and hungry. The physical pursuit, trekking and kayaking. I joined a small adventure group. We trekked the treacherous trails around the Fitzroy Massifs and kayaked among the ice floes. I was pushing my physical limits, finding a fierce, surprising strength in my 75th year. My body was no longer a vessel for sickness and worry. It was an instrument of exploration. The creative pursuit, abstract painting. My studio in the retreat became my sanctuary. I began a series of large, intensely blue and white abstract paintings, inspired by the geometry and solitude of the glacier. They were chaotic yet ordered, mirroring the process of my own life. My friends in the expat community, particularly Astrid and Ricardo, became my chosen family. They valued my company, my conversation, and my dry wit, not my bank account. We shared stories of betrayal and escape, creating a powerful, unspoken bond of shared emancipation. One afternoon, Astrid and I were having lunch, looking out over the mountains. "Do you ever worry about the sheer finality of it, Evelyn?" she asked gently. "That you will never speak to her again?" "I worry about the grandchildren, Astrid," I admitted, swirling the wine in my glass. "But Cassandra—" "No, I mourned her years ago. She died to me the day she wished me dead. What I am protecting now is the memory of the woman I am becoming, a woman who refused to be destroyed by her own progeny." The legal proceedings in New York continued to serve as a fascinating, distant spectacle. Mr. Sterling's regular updates were like a series of financial bulletins from a collapsing economy. The defamation suit is causing significant distress. Cassandra is spending all her meager earnings on legal fees. She is now counterclaiming emotional duress, but without the diminished capacity argument, her case is weak. Derek's latest attempt at a startup failed. He defaulted on the loans, forcing Cassandra to co-sign another debt. The pattern of instability persists. The reality was that my absence had forced them into a cycle of desperation, revealing the depth of their inherent financial incompetence. They hadn't lost their safety net. They had lost their ability to fail without consequence. I realized that the ultimate gift I had given them was the pain of responsibility. It was a brutal lesson, but the only one that could possibly shock them into genuine maturity. I made a deliberate choice to stop tracking their progress. I instructed Mr. Sterling to only notify me of major legal milestones, the end of the defamation suit, any contact from the grandchildren. I needed to enforce total cognitive closure. The true reward of my emancipation was this: the ability to walk away from the toxicity and focus entirely on my own flourishing. One Sunday, while trekking near the base of the glacier, Dr. Vega pointed out a small, resilient flower pushing up through a crack in the granite. It was tiny, intensely purple, and utterly magnificent against the gray rock. "The Viola Raiche," he said softly. "It is the only flower that thrives on this frozen, unforgiving landscape. It is pure will." I looked at the flower, its fragile strength a mirror of my own. I had survived the trauma, and now I was thriving in my own unforgiving landscape of radical self-interest. It was time to transform my experience into something tangible, something that could help the legions of other women trapped in their own gilded cages. I decided to write the book. Not a book of bitterness, but a manifesto of emancipation. I spent the next 6 months writing. I retreated further into my Patagonian sanctuary, documenting every agonizing detail. The $300 birthday cake, the chilling pronouncement in the hospital room, the ruthless precision of the financial severing, and the profound, cleansing silence of the Andes. The book wasn't a diary. It was a case study titled, "The Cost of Conditional Love: How I Became a Millionaire by Refusing to Die for My Daughter." I wrote late into the night, fueled by strong Argentine coffee and the furious necessity of the truth. I laid bare the generational expectation that mothers must be an infinite resource, a source of money, time, and emotional validation, with no expectation of reciprocity. I contacted an international publisher in London, known for its cutting-edge nonfiction and self-help manifestos. The editor, Ms. Serena Vance, was instantly captivated. "Evelyn," Serena said during our video call, her voice tight with professional excitement, "your story is going to be explosive. We talk about abuse from partners, from employers, but rarely about the tyranny of the adult child. This is a global epidemic of exploitation. The book was published 8 months later. I refused to do any media appearances or interviews in North America, maintaining my cloak of anonymity. I wanted the book to speak for itself, detached from the circus of my personal drama. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The book didn't just sell. It ignited a conversation. It became a bestseller across Europe and Latin America, translating the trauma of one woman into the shared experience of millions. The letters poured in, not to my publisher, but to a discreet P.O. box I had set up in Buenos Aires. They were letters of recognition, rage, and profound relief. Amelia from Spain. I read your chapter on the ATM with a heartbeat, and I finally had the courage to tell my 45-year-old son he has to leave my apartment. He called me selfish. But after reading your words, I know I'm not. I'm just tired of being used. Charlotte from Canada. Your story helped me realize that my chronic anxiety is simply the fear of the next phone call demanding money. I have closed my brokerage account and bought a small cabin in the woods. I choose my peace over their comfort. The letters were a catalog of pain. Mothers whose homes were glorified hotels. Mothers whose retirement funds were used for luxury cars and exotic vacations. Mothers whose health crises were ignored until they interfered with a child's plans. I realized my true purpose. My suffering was not meaningless. It was a beacon for others. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a rebel leader in a quiet revolution of elderly self-worth. Serena called me 2 weeks after the launch. Evelyn, we have an offer from a major European documentary studio. They want to film you, anonymously of course, in your Patagonian sanctuary, reading excerpts and discussing the philosophy of self-emancipation. I accept, I said. But the camera must focus on the glacier, not my face. I want the backdrop to be the sheer indifference of nature to human demands. The documentary, titled The Thorn Manifesto, went viral on YouTube and other platforms. I spoke directly to the camera, my voice clear and authoritative, stripped of any residual bitterness, simply stating the hard, clean facts of my experience. I focused on the core message. True love is mutual respect, not unilateral sacrifice. For decades, I confused emotional manipulation with filial love, I said in the documentary, my voice resonating with years of pain finally released. I confused constant demands with genuine need. It takes courage to look your child in the eye and say, my money is mine, and my life is my own. But once you do, you discover the terrifying, magnificent truth. You are not a bad mother. You are simply a free woman. I knew the documentary would find its way to Cassandra. I knew the public and global scale of my triumph would be a final, crushing blow. But this time it was not an attack. It was a legacy. The viral success of the Thorn Manifesto was the final, non-negotiable proof that I was not a victim of a breakdown, but the author of my own radical redesign. The media exposure had completely undermined Cassandra's pathetic attempts at a victim narrative. One morning, nearly a year after the publication of the book, an email landed in my heavily filtered inbox. The subject line was stark, acknowledgement. The address was one I hadn't seen in over a year, Derek's. I hesitated. I had vowed to maintain total silence, but Derek had always been the passive enabler, the quiet spectator to his wife's avarice. I felt a slight grudging curiosity. I opened the email. Evelyn, I saw your documentary. I heard your words. I need you to know that I agree with every single thing you said. I know my words mean nothing after the damage that's been done, but what Cassandra did to you in that hospital room, and frankly, what she did to you for years, was unforgivable. I was too weak, too reliant on your financial security to ever stand up to her. I failed you and I failed our family. She called you a burden. She was wrong. You were the only thing holding our collapsing world together, and now that you are gone, that world is dust. We lost everything, Evelyn. Everything. But the reason I am writing is the children. Leo and Maya miss their grandmother desperately. Cassandra has told them you are too sick to travel. They are heartbroken. I believe they deserve to know the truth when they are older, not this poisonous lie. I promise you, I will tell them everything when they are old enough to understand the difference between sacrifice and manipulation. I hope you are finding the happiness you deserve. I know an apology is too late, but I wanted you to know that at least one person in this shattered family acknowledges the extent of your sacrifice and the cruelty of our actions. Derek. I read the email 3 times, the paper crinkling in my hands. It was the first unconditional acknowledgement I had ever received from within that family unit. It didn't change my decision. The damage was too deep for retroactive apologies to heal. But it provided a profound, quiet sense of validation I hadn't realized I still craved. I replied immediately, my response carefully calibrated to offer grace without compromise. Derek, I appreciate your honesty. It takes a certain courage to admit a truth that has been intentionally obscured for so long. However, honesty after the fact does not mend a broken heart or rebuild a destroyed relationship. The actions you and Cassandra took revealed what you truly thought of me. That truth cannot be unsaid or wiped away by desperation. I hope this experience compels you to be a better man and father, and that you teach Leo and Maya the fundamental truth. Value the people who love you before the need for their resources disappears. Evelyn. I sent the email and blocked the address. The chapter remained closed, but the postscript had finally been written. A week later, a thick, clumsily wrapped package arrived at my Buenos Aires P.O. box. Inside was a letter, penned in 2 different styles of handwriting, and several sheets of folded paper covered in colored pencil. Dearest Grandma Evelyn, Dad told us you had to leave because Mom said some things that broke your heart. He said you were the bravest person he knows. We miss you so much. We don't understand everything, but we understand you needed to be happy. We are proud of you for being brave. When we are grown up and can make our own decisions, we want to come to Patagonia and see the beautiful ice mountains you wrote about. We love you, Leo and Maya, age 13. The drawings showed a vibrant, smiling woman, me, standing next to a massive blue glacier with 2 tiny, stick-figure children waving from the corner. I cried then, a flood of tears that was neither sad nor triumphant, but simply cathartic. My decision to leave, to choose dignity over comfort, had created a space for the truth to finally take root. I wrote them back, mailing the letter via certified post to Derek's work address, bypassing Cassandra completely. My dearest, bravest grandchildren, your words are the most beautiful gift I have received in my entire life. I love you both fiercely. When you are adults, the door to my heart and my home in the Andes will always be open. Until then, remember that the only currency that matters is respect. I am living a full, happy, and immensely free life. I will wait for you. Be strong, be kind, and remember the glacier moves. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it held a small, fragile seed of hope. 3 years had passed since the hospital room and the final brutal exchange. I was now 75, a published author, a seasoned Patagonian trekker, and an internationally validated woman of substance. My life was a mosaic of my own choosing, mornings spent sketching the glacial landscape, afternoons dedicated to philanthropic planning for the Thorn Foundation, and evenings filled with rich, intellectual conversation with my chosen community. I received a final, official communication from Mr. Sterling. The defamation suit against Cassandra had been officially dismissed with prejudice. Cassandra had run out of funds and could not pay the required legal fees to continue her counterclaim. The final humiliating ledger of the court confirmed her financial and moral bankruptcy. I learned, via Marilyn, who still occasionally provided carefully curated updates, that Cassandra and Derek were still in the small Queens rental. Derek had found stability in a logistics job. Cassandra had returned to work as an event coordinator, organizing parties for the very elite she had once pretended to be. She was working hard, earning her own way, without the safety net of my generational wealth. I didn't feel joy at their reduced circumstances, but a quiet, deep sense of justice realized. They were finally, truly, adults. One sunny afternoon, I stood on my deck, sipping a glass of exquisite Chilean Sauvignon Blanc. The air was crisp, the sky vast. I reached for my copy of The Cost of Conditional Love. The final chapter remained the most difficult. The most important, I began to write the ultimate conclusion, the lesson I wanted to etch into the minds of every woman who read my story. My daughter Cassandra asked for my death. I granted her that wish in the most spectacular way possible. I killed the woman she knew, the ever-sacrificing, financially accessible mother. The woman who emerged was a stranger to her, a sovereign being who valued her own dignity above all else. What Cassandra never calculated was that by losing me, she not only lost a mother who loved her unconditionally, but she also lost the financial anchor that had kept her life from drifting into the painful reality of consequence. My disappearance was my gift to her, forcing her to confront the world without a safety net. I paused, looking at the small framed drawing from Leo and Maya. They were the future, the reason the truth mattered. My greatest asset is no longer my $3.5 million portfolio. My greatest asset is the unshakable peace I feel here, in the cold, clear air of the Andes. I learned that the love of an adult child, if it is based on convenience and currency, is not love at all. It is a sophisticated form of economic abuse. I finished the final sentence, the one that summed up the entire journey. Sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to have the courage to lose yourself completely in order to be reborn as the person you were always meant to be. That night, I celebrated my 75th birthday. I sat with Astrid and Ricardo at a magnificent table overlooking the glacier. I raised my glass, not to a new year, but to a new life, a life I had brutally fought for and unequivocally won. To Evelyn, Astrid toasted, her eyes warm. The woman who taught us all that the final act of motherhood is often the radical emancipation of the self. I smiled, a full, radiant smile. And to the glacier, I added. May we all move with such relentless, indifferent power. They wanted my money, but they forced me to choose my soul. I left New York broken and humiliated, yet I return to you now as a millionaire, an author, and a woman fiercely free. If you are watching this, holding the phone, terrified of the next call, know this. Your peace is not selfish. Your money is not their inheritance. Your dignity is your greatest asset. My pain became my purpose, and yours can too. Don't let their conditional love kill the woman you were meant to be. Hit subscribe, join this community of self-made survivors, and let's start writing your final glorious chapter together.